Welcome to the Quit by Healing podcast. Today we're going to talk about something that has to do with awareness. And if you know my content, you've maybe heard me say that awareness is one of the key components that we have to bring in if we want to be able to overcome an addiction and to change our behavior. Today you'll discover a problem that is absolutely huge, but it is hidden in the shadows, which is to say that most people are not aware of what's happening. Even though what we're talking about today, which is essentially a dopamine problem, affects probably hundreds of millions of people, if not more, but most of them have no idea that it's happening or where it's going to lead. Now, as you're someone who's listening to this podcast, you are probably already more aware of some of the things I'm about to talk about. Although I guarantee you there'll still be aha moments for you in this episode. But as you're listening, I also want to encourage you to think, is there anyone else in your life? Do you know anyone who needs to hear this? Because fundamentally, what I'm talking about here can save you years and years of pain. So if there's someone else in your life who is still in that unaware phase, who you think they could benefit from hearing this and I could save them a few years of suffering, make sure to share this with them. So to start out, I'm going to talk about porn addiction because that's my wheelhouse. But as you'll see, this expands quite far beyond just pornography. But to explain what I mean, there's a problem here with porn addiction where a lot of people are like, well, what's the big deal? Why does this guy have a whole podcast, a whole YouTube channel dedicated to how to quit porn? Basically, what's the problem with porn? There's a whole bunch of people who are not yet suffering. Let's make this more specific. Let's take a hypothetical example. Imagine that we have a kid, 12 years old, let's call him Joey. At 12 years old, he discovers porn. That's pretty common, right? Most boys discover porn somewhere in that age range. And he discovers porn and it becomes a daily habit pretty soon. So before you know it, every evening before going to bed, Joey pulls out his phone, starts scrolling porn, starts watching porn videos, and masturbates to that. Now at this point in life, if you ask 12-year-old Joey, who's started doing this every day, if you tell him, hey, maybe you should quit doing this, he would rightfully say, well, why? I don't see any downside, right? I'm not suffering, basically. I'm not suffering. Like if I'm coming to you with here's how to quit porn, it's like I'm offering a solution to a problem that Joey doesn't have, or he doesn't perceive it as a problem because he likes it, right? He likes seeing naked girls. He likes watching people have sex. It's arousing. It's pleasurable. It feels good every time he does it. And this can stay the same for quite a long time. But let's fast forward a bit. Let's say 6 years later, Joey's 18 and he has his first girlfriend. And at some point they decide they're ready. They both want to have sex with each other. And then when they try to do that, then things don't go so well. Because now Joey discovers that he can't get an erection or he can't maintain an erection while trying to have sex with his girlfriend. This is very unpleasant, of course. On the one hand, he feels like what he should be able to do is have a raging erection and, pound his girlfriend like a machine for hours because that's what he always sees in pornography. And so he falls very, very short of that expectation of himself. But also his girlfriend probably feels like, oh my God, am I doing something wrong? Is he not attracted to me? This is overall very unpleasant situation. Now, if Joey's smart, he might do some research at this point because now he's suffering. Now he has a problem he wants to solve. And he does some research and he finds that, this can be a very common effect of watching porn every day for 6 years, which is what I've been doing. So by watching porn every day and masturbating to that, what you're doing is you're training your brain to be attracted and aroused by a specific situation, which is you're alone, you're looking at a screen and stuff is happening on that screen. That might involve very specific fetishes that you need to get off. And it might also, and it probably involves lots and lots of different girls, right? You're not just looking at one girl. You're kind of going through, maybe it's a rapid cut compilation or you scroll through loads and loads of videos, picking one after the other that appeals to you. And this is what you're training your brain to be aroused by. This is your association of sexual pleasure, is you alone with a screen with this hyperstimulation in a visual form. And this is why Joey has the erection problem he has when he's trying to have sex with his girlfriend. Because now there's no screen, he's not alone, there's another person here, it's just one girl, and so on. He's trained his brain to be aroused in a completely different scenario than he finds himself in when he's trying to have sex with his girlfriend. So see how for 6 years, from the moment he started watching porn to the moment he tried to have sex with his girlfriend, he was causing himself a problem with his porn addiction, but he only noticed it after 6 years, right? So for 6 years, he wasn't noticeably suffering, and now suddenly realize, uh-oh, I wish I hadn't done this. So this is what I mean when I say most people are unaware of it, and it can take a long time before the suffering, the consequences of your actions hit you. And ideally, you can solve the problem before that happens, right? Ideally, you don't have to wait for years and years and then have a huge problem in your life, and now you have to deal with it. Now, in many cases, it's actually worse and more complicated than the little story I just laid out with Joey. Because let's take a slightly different scenario. Again, Joey starts masturbating to porn from 12 years old, and by the time he's 18, he would like to have a girlfriend. He's looking for a girlfriend, but he can't seem to get one. He can't seem to get women interested in him. He can't seem to get past maybe 1 or 2 dates, and it never goes anywhere. And this becomes very frustrating. So Joey wants a girlfriend. He doesn't get one. At 18, at 19, at 20, this goes on. And again, this becomes suffering. Now Joey has a problem that he's highly aware of. He really wants a girlfriend, and this is completely normal. We all have an innate drive to seek a mate. We all have an innate drive to form that romantic connection with someone. We have an innate sex drive. And so this staying unfulfilled is extremely frustrating and causes loads and loads of pain and suffering because you start asking yourself, what's wrong with me? Why does nobody love me? Why can't I get a girlfriend, etc., etc. It's a very unpleasant situation. So once again, now the suffering hits, and it hits really hard. But here, how many people can put 2 and 2 together and realize, oh, it's my porn addiction that caused this? And I bet that a lot of people listening right now are even thinking, well, hold on, what does using porn every day have to do with whether you get or don't get a girlfriend? So let's break it down. So one of the effects that porn has, and the reason it is as addictive as it is that it essentially puts you on a dopamine roller coaster. It gives you a very quick, very strong spike of dopamine, and you have to put essentially no work into getting it, right? All you have to do is whip out your phone, pull up a porn site, and right away you get a sexual reward, a highly stimulating sexual situation. It's just super rewarding. And this is something that normally, absent porn, so the way we evolved, the way our ancestors lived, this is highly rewarding, of course. Again, we have an innate sex drive, we have an innate drive to procreate, but usually it would take some kind of work. It would take some kind of pursuit, right? Like you see an actual woman in real life and you have to go and seduce her and woo her, and then eventually you get to have sex. But with porn, you can basically shortcut past all of that, get straight to the most rewarding thing. So this gives you a huge spike of dopamine, which also rapidly collapses and makes you want more, which makes you want another spike and another spike and another spike, which of course, again, porn delivers because you can watch the next clip, the next girl, the next thing. These spikes of dopamine, this instant gratification, is highly addictive. And it's in part highly addictive because after the spike, you have what's called a crash below baseline. So you feel really good for a moment, and then you feel worse than before. So it makes you want another spike to feel better again. But then again, you feel worse than before. You want another spike, you feel worse, and so on. The result of this is that your baseline dopamine becomes low. You end up in a state that, let's call it dopamine depletion, right? You are at a much lower state of dopamine than before you gave yourself all of those spikes. And it's not just porn that does this. It's all kinds of forms of digital distraction and entertainment. There's all kinds of dopamine dispensers, such as TikTok or Instagram or other forms of social media. Something all of these have in common is that they give you these rapid, short spikes of instant gratification, these short dopamine spikes. And what they also all have in common is that they lead you to this dopamine depleted state. Now, dopamine is a hormone of reward, of pleasure, but also of motivation and drive. Dopamine has this dual function of, yes, it feels good when you get it, but it also drives you to seek things that give you dopamine. Okay, so it's essentially the hormone of inner drive and motivation. So let's bring this back to Joey and his porn addiction. Joey finds himself to generally be unmotivated and apathetic. He just can't seem to get himself to do things like play a sport or go to the gym regularly or, pursue a career or pursue interests to a deeper depth. He tries, right? So for example, he's not in great shape and he's like, oh, I should be in better shape and maybe I could get a girlfriend if I looked better. So he tries and he signs up for the gym, but he just can't seem to get himself to do it. He just lacks the drive to actually do it. And this is true in all areas of life. He's just not the kind of person who goes after things, In fact, it seems like the only thing he can really find motivation to do is to do things that give him these instant gratification dopamine spikes. So what does Joey do with his life? Well, he does what he must. So maybe he works a job because he has to, or he goes to school because he has to. And during all his free time, he is basically interacting with screens. And he's interacting with screens in such a way that he gets these dopamine hits. So that's pornography, that's social media, that's maybe playing video games and things like that. That's what he does with his life. That's how he spends his time. Because again, it just seems like he can't motivate himself to do anything else. Very few people make this connection, but what I'm describing here is a direct result of this dopamine depletion that comes from being a porn addict and a social media addict and a video game addict. Now, what does this have to do with whether he gets a girlfriend or not? Well, guess what? Joey is not an attractive man. In fact, he's not a man at all. And I'm not saying this as an insult. I'm saying this, I can guarantee you, if you know someone like this, he doesn't feel like a man and he doesn't think of himself as a man. He is basically a boy who is a consumer. And if you have nothing going on in your life, if you don't take good care of yourself and stay in shape and have interests you pursue and so on, then you're just not a very attractive partner. It's going to be very difficult to get a girl interested in you. And what most people don't realize is that the solution to this, the first step of the solution to this, is to remove the instant gratification dopamine. Remove the thing that's putting you in this unmotivated, dopamine depleted state. Which means, yes, you have to quit porn. But as I've said in other places, that's usually not enough. Because if all you do is you quit porn and then you just spend more time on TikTok instead, you really haven't done much to solve this problem. What you need to do is you need to remove these dopamine dispensers. You need to remove these addiction dispensers from your life. And you need to start bringing in sources of healthy dopamine, such as going to the gym or doing some kind of exercise or playing a sport that you enjoy, such as learning things, like actually learning things deeply, not by scrolling through TikTok or watching a documentary where, you half pay attention as long as it's very entertaining, but you're not actually learning anything. No, I mean, learn something that you're interested in, like by reading books about it. Other healthy sources of dopamine include going on adventures with your friends or just hanging out and socializing and creating things, being creative, whether that's in some kind of an artistic way or creating a business or just doing things actively in the world. Now, initially, yes, this is going to feel hard because we're starting from a dopamine depleted state and it's going to feel very hard to feel motivated to do this. But by removing the dopamine dispensers, by removing the stuff that makes you dopamine depleted in the first place, you will very quickly find that it's much easier to feel motivated to do it. In fact, this usually only takes a few weeks. So within 2 or 3 weeks, Joey will find himself in a situation where he actually wants to go to the gym. And he actually wants to go out and go on adventures and do things and explore things and discover things, because actually we all have an innate drive to do this. And we are basically stamping that down. We're stamping down our motivation and our thirst for adventure and our curiosity with these constant dopamine spikes. So while in the beginning, something like exercising regularly feels impossible because you just can't motivate yourself to do it, pretty soon you do it because you want to. So if we do this in Joey's life, we remove these dopamine dispensers, we remove the stuff he's addicted to, he starts to do more of these healthy dopamine things. What happens over time? What happens a few months, a few years down the line? Well, now he is suddenly becoming an attractive man, because now he's someone who's in better shape. He's someone who pursues things. He maybe pursues a skill or he's pursuing a career, right? He wants to become good at something, for example, right? Again, that's an innate drive. He's not forcing himself to. He's just like, I really want to crush this. I really want to become excellent at this. And he pursues things. And this just makes him a more capable, more attractive, more interesting person overall, which then makes it way easier, way more likely that he's actually going to get a girlfriend. There's another thing here that most people don't know about that's worth mentioning that's very specific about porn. And this is well studied. There's lots of studies that show that pornography consumption changes our attitude towards other people. For simplicity's sake here, I'm just going to come from the perspective of a straight man, but obviously this applies to all other configurations as well. But as a straight guy, you're watching all this porn, and it makes you perceive women differently. Because the way you're interacting with women in your life is you see them as like these objects, right? Where you're like rapidly scrolling through them to find the one that turns you on the most. And the use of this person that you're seeing is just to get you off. And they're very dispensable. And this even carries over into dating apps, right? So you're watching porn, and in order to try and get a girlfriend, you're using dating apps, or again, swipe, 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 swipe. So you have this overstimulation, and you have an over-sexualization and objectification, where you tend to see women as potential sex objects. You might also have very unrealistic ideas of what a woman is supposed to look like, because with porn, you have like thousands of porn stars to pick from, and you just, the one with just the perfect proportions, just how you like it, right? And you feel like every woman has to look at least like that in order to be attractive to you or something like that. And you're pretty far removed from being able to just connect with another person on like a real grounded level. And guess what? Women will pick that up. And women are pretty good at reading a situation and figuring out what's going on. And she might not be able to say exactly what's going on, but she goes on a date with you and she just gets a creepy vibe from you. Like, she picks up on the fact that you're not quite there, or you're not quite connecting with her. And it's basically just, it's not something specific you do. It's just you have porn brain and it seeps through. She notices and she's like, this felt weird. I don't feel good around this person. I don't want a second date. So when you remove pornography, and also to a large degree social media, where you might also be like swiping through bikini pics and stuff, right? When you remove that kind of thing out of your life, you start resetting that part of your brain, and you start seeing other people more like real people. It starts resetting your expectations, and you might also find that you have more of a desire to actually connect with a person on a personal level, and not just be like, oh, I just want something to have sex with. And again, this is a connection that not many people make. It's not an obvious connection, but without doing anything deliberately differently, you go on a date with a woman and you just act differently. She just gets a different vibe from you because you have changed your sources of dopamine, you've changed the way you act, and you've removed this kind of corrupting influence from your life. You just come across differently, and it makes it so much more likely that she's interested, that she feels good around you, and that she wants a second date and it leads somewhere. And this brings me to one more thing that I want to point out in this scenario that I've laid out. If we take Joey, who is currently addicted to all the dopamine dispensers, he is suffering, right? Even though he's spending as much of his time as possible doing things that are essentially pleasurable, overall, it is not pleasant to be Joey. He's not very healthy. He doesn't take good care of himself. His mental health is not great. Part of the reason he's addicted to all this stuff is because he's trying to distract himself from all the negativity in his mind. He probably doesn't like himself very much. He doesn't have a love for life, right? He doesn't skip out of bed in the morning, happy to have another day on earth. He's probably fairly miserable. He might even be full-on depressed. And yes, this is also a direct result of spending years and years and years on all of these dopamine dispensers. You're essentially a form of addict, right? It's like being a drug addict, where if someone's a drug addict for years, no one's surprised if their health deteriorates and they feel terrible. Well, it's no different being addicted to porn and social media and all of this other stuff. So the question really is, how long do you have to keep doing this? How deep does the suffering have to become before you go, hey, something's wrong here, I need to change something? And this is the value of awareness. This is why I'm making this content, right? Ideally, you can catch this early. Ideally, you don't have to get like really deep into a horrible rock bottom situation before you realize, oh, maybe all of these addictions are ruining my life. Because obviously, the longer you stay addicted, the longer you drag this out, the more work it will also be to get unaddicted and change your life. It's never too late, right? You can always change. But the earlier you catch it, the better off you are. So right now, there's probably hundreds of millions of guys who are somewhere in this situation, who are some version of Joey, and who are mostly unaware of how much of a problem they're causing themselves with porn addiction and social media addiction and so on. If you are a version of Joey, I hope that this has opened your eyes to what's going on, and I hope that this is motivation for you to change. And like I said, you'd be surprised at how quickly things improve when you do change. But also, like I mentioned at the beginning, if you know someone else, or like, oh yeah, they're definitely going down this path and they have no idea, because hey, most of us are flying blind, right? Most of us are flying blind until, like I said, the suffering gets so bad that we go, hey, what's going on? And we start doing some research, and then hopefully we find these answers. If you know someone like that, send them this and it might change their life. And this really is just to help people. So I'm not selling anything here, right? Obviously, if you want to learn more about this, you can find me on YouTube. You can find the podcast. It's Quit by Healing. And I talk about all kinds of strategies for overcoming these dopamine addictions, for building these positive replacement habits, and for using this kind of behavior change to change your life in a really meaningful way. Also, if you want to ask me a question, if you want to send a question that I can respond to in a future episode, you can go to anchor.fm/QbH. That's QbH for Quit by Healing. So anchor.fm/QbH. You can go there, click the message button. You can record a voice message and I'll get those and I can respond to those in a future episode. So with that, thank you for watching and I look forward to hearing from you.